4 o'clock hour of the program. A lot of baseball early. I'll tell you what, though. Even though football will be a significant part of the discussion, Kevin Seifert's in studio. Questions via the Bradshaw and Bryant KFN text line, 64686. You've been around not as long as me, but pretty long. When did you get to town? What year?
1999.
Okay, so now that's 25 years. Am I doing my math right?
Wow, we need an anniversary
So are we
party.
right? Are you coming upon the anniversary, or is it already passed?
It already happened. It happened last month.
You should have told us. We would have had a big presentation for it. 25 years.
Well, is there any cake left?
No, probably not.
There might be like a crumble cookie in the break room or something. Sometimes
Half
people,
eaten.
yeah, people bring those sometimes.
Lovely.
So everybody touches it.
Sounds tasty.
And then somebody still eats it, which is amazing.
No, they don't.
Oh, God, yes. You kidding me?
There's usually a knife in there. I don't think people use their fingers that
You
bad.
don't?
Not that much, no.
Yeah, well, I don't trust people.
I've had
as
no
much as you,
issues.
I know.
I've had no issues eating them.
Anyway, 25 years is a good run.
Oh.
So if you were advising the prospective new Twins owners to what this market has become like, what's the current condition of the Minnesota sports market, just so he has an idea, lay of the land of what he or she or they might be walking into, what would your best advice be in terms of what it's like here now?
A great sports market that is, I feel, is often beat down by the circumstances of how long it's been since there's been a parade here, unless except for the Lynx.
The Lynx.
And maybe another one this year.
Yeah, and don't forget our
your
Frisbee title, too.
Or Frisbee.
The wind chill.
Yeah. So
And PWHL.
And PWHL.
The Frost.
The Frost, yeah.
So of the four, and we don't have to go back over the stats, but like it's like not even close when you compare this market to any other market that has the big four leagues in terms of when the last championship is. So it's a high mark to hit, but the fans here very much want a championship and have gone through a lot in the process of not getting one in the past 32 years.
I think that's fair to say. And I also mentioned, we all know it's a football town. It's a Vikings town more than any other sport, although I said one of the things I think that's changed just in the last 2 years is it's becoming a very strong basketball town.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because I always sometimes I'll sort of test that theory out when I'm away out of state or out of country even. And this is, you're going to say I'm bragging, but I'm not bragging. But over spring break, we were in Italy and we were,
you have to apologize for taking a nice vacation.
Gelato shop after gelato shop. And we went into one and the guy asked us where we were from and we said Minnesota. And so he's like, oh, I'm a big sports fan. So here we go on the Vikings. He mentioned the Wolves. I think it was during the playoffs, so that's part of it. But I don't remember the last time I was out of state, even let alone out of the country, when somebody had associated the first thing they had associated the state of Minnesota with was something other than the Vikings from a sports perspective. So that's my anecdotal confirmation of your theory.
Yeah, and that is anecdotal, but I think we have other maybe also substantive, more analytical evidence as well.
Yeah.
They haven't arrived because they haven't won a title yet, but they're in a completely different place nationally and internationally as well. So you're walking into that too. And that's a little different given how long that franchise has been a laughingstock. The Wild, you could say, were in the pecking order a little bit above the Wolves for a long time, but the Wild now, they've slipped. Sorry, Fallness. They've slipped behind for sure.
Yeah.
They have an opportunity to do something about it, but until they do, that's kind of what they're dealing with here is that they are, I don't even know. Are the Twins, if we're doing pecking order, it's Vikings 1, obviously.
Yeah.
Still, regardless. It's Wolves 2, I think, pretty clearly at this point.
Yep.
Are the Twins and the Wild in the same place? Or because baseball is not as popular in general, leaving aside the Twins here, all across the country, but I would say that no, those two are maybe on the next plateau, but maybe together, and I don't know who would be ahead of the other.
And baseball, and this is not so much a Twins thing specifically, but baseball is such a hard sport to be a fan of, I think, unless you're in one of the markets that spend a lot of money.
Yeah, right.
Like, And I know you don't have to, spend $300 million to be in the playoffs or whatever.
No,
but
check the Guardians.
Yeah, check the Guardians. There's always one, but there's always one, and it's like you start the season, you're supposed to be hopeful in spring training, and there's just, if you're at all a realistic fan, you're just hoping it's a fun season where the players do entertaining things and there's some, end of the year, they're still playing meaningful games, but it's not like, like the NFL, where like, 2/3 of the markets can credibly say, hey, if this, and this happens, we got a chance. In baseball, and I'm starting to feel this way in college football also, when you start the season, there's only a handful of teams that even remotely have a chance to win a
Well, now you're
championship.
starting to sound like one of the Pohlad family.
Well, then if I were in that spot, I'd probably be getting out too.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's the way. And let's give somebody, who knows what the next group's going to do. They may come to the exact same conclusion.
Well,
I think they're going to wait a while because I don't think there's any point in purchasing and then immediately, laying the groundwork to this is really hard to do and don't expect us to do too much too soon.
Yeah, there's aesthetic ways or surface ways to appear to be spending money when you haven't necessarily committed to being major players quite yet.
Major NFL trades to discuss. Let's stay on schedule, get a quick pause in, get your reaction to those deals. We got a lot of people clamoring. They're greedy. We know the Vikings are 5-0. They're worried. They got FOMO issues that some good players might still be out there, and all we can do is strike while the iron's hot. Is that possible? Who might that be? Who else might be dealt? All that.
Money.
Oh, we got to put money in somebody's hand. That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah. Go ahead.
2 Men in the Junk Truck specifically want to do that. National Cash Contest, the keyword deposit. Go to KFAN.com and enter the keyword deposit.
Wild are miles ahead of the Twins. It's the state of hockey, Dan. Come on. Do we want to have this argument again?
I thought it was Twins territory.
Yeah, and it's state of hockey doesn't mean state of professional hockey. It just doesn't. It means we've got the layers of hockey, right? High school,
100%.
college, pro. It's not.
I think they're just trying to get you going.
And they're doing a good job of it. Let's pause. We'll come back and let's talk trades, A-Raj, and maybe an injury update or two as the Vikings prepare for Lions week.
Wow.
Carl from Lake Elmo asks this, Kevin Seifert, who joins us in studio. Louie will be with us in the 5 o'clock hour. I'm seeing lots of online chatter from Vikings fans proposing trades for Garrett, Max Crosby, Mike Williams, and several others. Did everybody forget we only have 3 picks total next draft? What could we possibly offer? Am I missing something? So let's talk about the trades that haven't happened yet, and then we'll get to the ones that already have. So is there anything for the Vikings to chew on? Is there an asset problem, even if they wanted to do it? What do you think?
Well, one thing that's happened over the course of the past few years with the NFL trade deadline, it's gone from people picking up like spare parts that they might be able to help them out from a depth perspective, or somebody who's at the end of their career and maybe help them for a few months, to teams in some cases, and I think the Vikings did this with TJ Hawkinson a couple years ago, basically getting a head start on free agency. And saying, well, yeah, of course, he's going to help us this year. But if we could trade for him now, then we don't have to compete for him necessarily in the offseason, and we get him, for half the season this year. So, I think there's probably some positions that the Vikings, could use to shore up when we talk about the spare part thing. But I'm more intrigued in the possibility, and I wish I had like 5 names I could give you. But of teams that might be saying, like, you know what, we're far away, like let's get rid of our guy that instead of, we know we're not going to sign him or what have you, and see what we can get for him now. And so that's the area that will be interesting. If the Vikings want to be more conservative, or at least not shoot quite as high, like there's going to be some running backs, I think, that are available. Maybe Houston had a guy, Damian Pierce, that I think is his name, and that's a possibility. Or
how about the Carolina guy?
Hubbard, potentially. Yeah. Like, you would think Carolina would be looking to see if anyone wants anybody. Like Adam Thielen's name is getting thrown around a lot. But that's and you're right. They only have the 3. They have the first rounder and a couple third day picks. next year, and then I guess they could start trying to get into 2026. And you could argue both ways. Like my initial reaction is like you at some point you gotta start building things up through the draft, and like they've done a great job in free agency. They had to, because they've gotten almost no help from the past 3 drafts from a volume perspective. But at some point you reach the point of no return where you're too heavily tilted towards depending on veterans you acquire from elsewhere. And the core of your team is no longer draft picks, and that's never a good formula. So, if they feel like they can get a head start on free agency and bring in a big name that is unexpectedly coming available, then I could see that being a smart longer term play. Otherwise, I would expect, at best, like some spare parts type of thing.
What will the Lions have to give up to get Max Crosby? He played college ball at Eastern Michigan, and it was terrible to see the injury time, but they have a huge void with Hutchinson going down. Curious, because I feel like these two teams, I assume he means the Lions and Vikings, will be fighting for the division and potential top seed in playoffs. He would like to see the Vikings make a move, perhaps for a defensive tackle, maybe Simmons from Tennessee, or any running back that might be available to add some depth. That's Saul and Blaine.
Yeah. So Max Crosby is a 27-year-old, we just established, pass rusher who might be the best in the league. Definitely in the top 5 of the second most important position in the NFL after quarterbacks. So to me, it's like if I'm the Raiders, it's got to be at least a first-round pick, and if it's the Lions, then it's a low first-round pick. So you're looking at multiple. I mean, it's going to have to be a massive haul, and maybe the Lions will step up and say, "Look, it's been since 1957 or whatever year when the 50s it was that they last
57
won a championship. Let's not let this opportunity slip away because Aiden Hutchinson's injury." So that, but it would have to be, unless the Raiders are just not being run very well, and I think they're being run okay by the GM that they hired this year, Tom Telesco. It's going to take a lot.
Devontae Adams to the Jets. No big surprise, I guess, right?
No, they probably could have used him last night if they had but I guess he has been hurt, and so maybe he would, if they had done the trade earlier, I'm not sure that he would have been able to play or not. But look, if you've committed yourself to Aaron Rodgers to the extent that the Jets have, you've got no other options in the short term, like maximize that we're talking about windows here. Like the Jets are maximizing their window. They have by definition mortgaged their future already for Aaron Rodgers. So I don't know if you can mortgage it again, like it's already mortgaged. And so they have a hole to dig out of, and while it sounds great, there's now Rodgers to Adams, there's still such a mess around them. More power to them if they can find a way to rise above it and bring the rest of the team with them. But you're talking about an interim coach who's never been a head coach before. You're talking about a play caller in Todd Downing who has called plays before, but is in a tough spot with the previous guy still on the staff and still friends with the quarterback, and so he's got a very sensitive, tight rope to walk, and so there's still a lot of things to be skeptical about with the Jets. But if they had that opportunity and they let it pass, then
you almost have to.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's going to work out because they got a lot of issues. You heard the Belichick line last night with the Mannings about the ownership, ready, fire, aim.
He has just been crushing the Jets from the day he was given a microphone with his first media. And I think that's probably the real reason why Bill Belichick has taken all these media roles, is simply just to savage the Jets from start to finish and find all these weird connections that he can credibly bring them up so he can then just trash them some more. So, but that's been one of the more entertaining parts of his media tour.
Buffalo gets a receiver as well, correct?
Yeah, they traded for Amari Cooper from Cleveland. Amari Cooper has made the rounds to a few places over the years.
Where's Deshaun Watson going to land?
I mean, the bench, and that, and our Bill Barnwell wrote a pretty good column of just going through all the details of that, and it's just, I mean, no matter what happens, they're going to have to pay him $45 million a year for the next 3 years, and whether he's on the team or not, the cap, they do a pretty good job with their cap, so it won't totally cripple them, but it's still that's a lot of money to pay a guy to not play, and so. It's an unprecedented amount of money to pay a guy to not play. And it's not like Jameis Winston, who's their backup, is the answer to all their prayers. But it's just he's basically had the worst season to start a season of any quarterback in
forever
in the century.
Yeah.
There was I think there was 588 quarterbacks who qualified for this ranking, and he was 566. And this, and usually people who are that bad don't get a chance to compile enough games to qualify for something like that, and yet he has.
So are we going to see Hawkinson this week?
If I had to guess, I'd say no. The way they timed his return from the PUP list in London made it suggested that what they were trying to do was give themselves the option to not even play him in Los Angeles next week if they don't think he's ready, and that it would either be in Los Angeles or the following week against the Colts. And so if they weren't sure about whether he'd be ready for that Rams game, then it's hard for me to believe he'd be ready for this weekend's game.
A lot of talk about Dalton Reisner now being available, and the belief that maybe he needs to be he needs to be inserted somewhere at guard because of the struggles of our right guard thus far. Do you agree about those struggles? And do you see Reisner? Do you think the Vikings are looking at Reisner as a guy that could be immediately put in the starting lineup, or not so much?
Potentially, if he's just fantastic in practice this week, and I think it's much more likely he would be at right guard than left guard. I think Brandel is going to stick.
They don't want to mess with, even though he can play both, right?
Yeah.
They want to just because he's doing so well.
Well, he had a rough game in London with Quinnen Williams is one of the better defensive tackles in the league, and he had his struggles with him. But a lot of people do, and so I don't think that's really shaken their belief in him. But do you switch up two positions, or do you say not? Because not only would he be moving from left guard, you'd have the left tackle would then have a new player next to him, and the right tackle would have there'd be so. If there's going to be a replacement, I think it would be Dalton Reisner for Ed Ingram on the right side. I don't know that it's going to happen this week. I guess it's possible if they like what they see in practice. But I think that watching Reisner at right guard throughout training camp sort of set the message of what they had intended for there at least to be a competition there, and so I think there's now a competition there.
I am very much looking forward to the Sunday noon game, Vikings and Lions, for I think all the obvious reasons. What stands out to you about the matchup now?
First of all, you could argue they're the two most dominant teams in the league in terms, people often look at point differential. What's the difference between the amount of points you've scored versus the amount of points your opponents have scored? And Vikings are number one in the league, and I think it's 63, and the Lions are number 2. So the shorthand analytic way of ranking teams, that's the way you do it.
Yeah.
And so those are the two teams that having the most dominant games, at least over their opponents, and we know that the Vikings schedule has been very good. I'm interested. I think one of the, and I'm going to write about this week, is one of the themes that's very clear is that if you look at most of the, I think it's the O'Connell tenure has been back to 2022, so 2, and then 4 last year. If you look at the games that Justin Jefferson has played against this Lions defense since he's been with O'Connell, and just the overall passing offense, they have just lit it up. And in some cases, it's because they were behind and they had to catch up. But I think Justin Jefferson has more yards in his career against the Lions through 8 games than any player has ever had against an opponent after 8 games. I think he's had, I think it's 6 of the 8 have been 100-yard games. There's been a 200-yard game in there, a 190-yard game in there. Since O'Connell got here, the Vikings are averaging 340 passing yards per game against the Lions. And so there would seem to be an opportunity to be... You're
giving him permission to throw the ball 62 times.
Well, with Aaron Jones questionable, maybe that's what they should do. About Aaron Jones?
What did your gut tell you about Jonesy?
I was surprised he was at practice yesterday. Even though it was a kind
limited?
Of it was just a bonus practice.
Right.
They didn't have pads on. They were just kind of basically getting moving and reminding and walking through the plays. I think it's at best 50-50. And I'd probably err on the side of below 50%. chance to play. It sounds like it's a potentially chronic thing, and you can either try to week see if he's good enough to go, or just kind of let him be idle for a little bit and hopefully get it back to where it's not becoming a week to week thing anymore. And so, whether or not he plays, if he does play, he's not going to be 100%. Like, I think this is probably an opportunity.
Then don't play
see
him.
I
don't want to play him at 22%.
Plus, they're averaging 340 passing yards a game against him. Why would you worry about running the ball?
You're falling into that same trap. Honestly, it's like
it's the facts.
You guys, it's the facts. But how many of those games did we win?
That's the interesting one. Is the only one that they have is the one where they had the lowest amount of passing.
Well, there you go. There's more to it than that. You know how this game works.
It's not like the Lions were just wanted them to run that up. So I think there's been some matchup. One of the games, the Lions tried to really just be physical with Jefferson, and he didn't catch a lot, but I think they had 8 penalties for like illegal contact or defensive pass interference or defensive holding. So, and that's what the Jets tried to do last week as well, and they had 5 of those kind of penalties. And so those penalty yards add up, and they're all automatic first downs, and so that helps too. And so, I guess the Lions pick their poison in that situation, and we'll see what they do this week. But I do think that's a matchup the Vikings have exploited and will need to exploit to win this game.
So what does the mad professor Brian Flores cook up in the laboratory against this offense that looked absurd against the Dallas defense? Now, admittedly, the Dallas defense against the run is especially awful, and Detroit can run very well. But what's the formula here to try to put the Lions offense off balance?
Well, that's the thing is, he mentioned, today is like the problem with preparing for this defense is this offense, when you watch them and you say, okay, where's their weakness? We'll attack their weakness. That's, you always can find a weakness on every team. And like, if he found one, he wasn't going to say, but what he said was like, there's really no like obvious thing where you say, oh, that guy
we can sell out for this,
or like, or I'm okay if this guy is able to get his yards but I still think like they have to, like, if you were prioritizing, and as crazy as it sounds, like you really have to prioritize the run defense. You have to, however you do that, if it's extra people up or just who you're playing or what type of, whether you're going to call run blitzes or no run blitz, all those decisions should be that, and you don't need me to say like it's like you have to stop the run to win games. But like if the Lions can do anything close to the way they've been running the ball against some of these teams,
then
it's going to be really
play
hard
off of that and do everything.
And then it's really hard to do anything else. So and I'm sure Flores is on top of it. How he's going to do that.
That's one of the interesting things. What does he, come up with that might challenge them?
And a lot of their, fundamentals are like telling the offense they're doing something and then doing something different, and so, is there a way for Flores to to show Jared Goff that they've lined up, in an inviting run defense, and then him to check to a run, and then them to switch after the check to a strong run defense, and then suddenly be able to match up and do that. It'll won't just be a matter of who's most physical and who can beat blocks. It'll be like, can they get Jared Goff to put the Lions offense in disadvantage situations that can help the Vikings defense?
With Hutchinson out, tell me about the rest of the line. I mean, is that doomed the Lions in terms of pressuring Darnold, or are they pretty good all the way across the front?
Well, they got some good linebackers that can blitz, like in terms of like edge rushers, like that. Obviously, Hutchinson was the guy, but I think it's, how do you pronounce it? Like Alizoni, the linebacker, is very good, and can cause havoc. And Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator, is a little bit like Flores in that you don't know what's coming from play to play. And so there'll be some mind games as a result to that. The real interesting thing is they kind of redid their secondary in the offseason, and they traded for Carlton Davis, who's a cornerback that was in Tampa, and then they drafted a cornerback number 1 overall or number 1 first round draft pick and Terrion Arnold, and so they've got some new faces there, and be interesting to see if they have any more success against the Vikings passing offense. But clearly, like their pass rush is taking a hit, and they're going to have to compensate for it.
I got your change of pace running back to go out and get before the deadline.
Who?
My guy, Khalil Herbert, buried now in Chicago.
Yeah,
he's become a return guy. They've gone They're going with the Roshan Johnson, the big back, as the backup to Swift. Herbert is, again, he's not a main guy, I don't think, but as a guy who can come in, I've always thought he was a bit of an underrated runner. He's a little guy. He's only 5'9", but there's your guy. There's
so the Bears would happily give the Vikings somebody that can help them. Well, that's the question. They've done trades. The Vikings have obviously done trade with the Lions, and haven't they done a trade with the Bears?
You're probably right.
In the draft, I think. And so, that's that was for the Packers. I'm not sure about the Bears, but they've done Kwesi's done interdivision trades with at least two of the other three teams, and so it's not. They would certainly do it. Whether the Bears would be looking to help them out, I guess it depends if they felt like they came out whole or better on the other side.
This is from Christian in Rosemont. Better 5-year outlook: Vikings or Lions?
Well, the Vikings quarterback of the future is much younger, and so I think that there's
Goff's not 50.
No, but he's
in his prime.
Yeah,
is he? How old is Goff?
He's probably like 30-ish, 31, and so. But the Vikings quarterback of the future is 21 at the time.
He just turned 30 yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, there it is. October
birthday
14th.
To him.
Yeah.
It's not.
Who you've never given proper credit. You've always been kind of patronizing about Jared Goff.
The Lions fans like to remind me that my prediction when he was acquired in the Seifert trade was that he would spend the rest of that year as their starter and then never be a starter again. That worked out well. That's why I don't like getting asked to make predictions, because nobody remembers when you get them right, but they love it when you get it wrong.
Are you a great flex game mind? Because
a little bit.
I've said since yesterday, the Vikings game should have been flexed to the 3:30 window as far as I'm concerned. Now, I think the Bears Commanders are maybe a different network. I don't know who had what game.
Yeah.
This is a Fox game this week, I think, Bears Lions, isn't it, Guardsy? Finally? Or is it next week? I don't remember. But I guess I'm a little surprised that Bears Lions would not be flexed.
Yeah, and there's always games that get protected.
Although Kansas City is the late game we determined yesterday, and I guess you can't touch Kansas City.
No, you can't. Everybody wants the Swifties all need to know what the schedule is going to be far in advance.
By the way, Sol and Blaine is back. Wondering, did you mean to say?
Oh, no. What did I say?
That the future at quarterback is JJ? Have you given up on the notion that Darnold might be here
I'm actually, locally and nationally, I'm surprised that conversation hasn't already heated up more than it has, and it really hasn't heated up at all. I cannot conceive of a scenario where JJ McCarthy is not the future quarterback. And it's hard to imagine a scenario where they bring Darnold back in a way that he would want to be back. In other words, through a long-term contract, either they could franchise tag him and potentially trade him off the tag if they wanted to, or keep him just as insurance for if McCarthy, is rusty or otherwise not ready to start next year. But I still think the odds on favorite for the 2025 starter is JJ. And certainly there's a lot more of the season to play, but it's just hard for me to, and part of that's based on how close he was to, and I think we've talked about this, how close he was to potentially being the week one or at least a September starter this year had he not gotten hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a 36-hour window after that first preseason game where he had played really well in that game. Everybody was fired up. They were going to Cleveland. He was going to have 2 practices there. And if he crushed those 2 practices and then he was going to start the preseason game in Cleveland. And if he crushed that preseason game in Cleveland, then
there would have been a lot.
It would have been interesting.
Well, you would have been fanning the flames for sure. We know that.
Well, I would have been reluctantly doing, because I had been predicting, which is why I hate predicting, that there was little to no chance that he'd be the week one starter. But the only path to him doing that would have been continuing to crush it in a way that you say well, what's he going to get? What's left for him to put together off the field before he starts playing on? And, but that's not just doing well, crushing those 3 things. And so maybe he would have. It was certainly in the realm of possibility, whereas it had not been up until that point. And so if he was that close to being, it's hard for me to imagine that they think he will need more seasoning into the 2025 season.
Darnold is 15th in QBR and 12th in EPA per dropback. JJ is the future.
You're a big EPA per dropback guy.
I've never even heard of it. I thought that was Environmental Protection Agency in my world.
Expected points added.
Oh, okay, you love that one, don't you?
It's an analytic.
By the way, another texter wants to compliment you for the story you wrote on the future Gophers quarterback. He apparently thinks you're Chip Scoggins because it just came in as Chip. Loved your story on the future Gopher QB.
I'll let Chip know that there's a listener that likes it.
That's amazing. Let's do this. Let's get a pause in here. We still got another solid segment with Seifert in studio. Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line is open, 646-86. A little bit more on Vikings Lions, and we may broaden out the discussion to how seriously we can take all these stories, these very laudatory stories are regarding the unprecedented start to the season for the NFC North. I think a cumulative 17-5 to this point. Papa Taco is texting. Papa Taco is texting about something that is not related to you being Chip Scoggins, even though your name is Kevin Seifert. So we'll save the Papa Taco text for 763 guy. Apologizing. Dan, you got me. As soon as I sent that, I thought that sure sounds like Seifert. My only poor defense is I could have sworn I heard you mention Chip's name earlier in the show. And then I was off doing something else. I came back, just knew I wanted to thank Chip. I'm glad it wasn't something more controversial. So there you have it.
So it's your fault.
I guess it's my fault. I didn't even realize. Did I mention Chip in the first hour? He's been writing a lot about the Twins. He's another non-ball guy who's not qualified to talk about them and write about them, but has. But I don't know. I don't remember him coming up. Papa Taco wants to know if there's any chance the Vikings would go get Garrett from the Browns. We actually, I think, covered this before, did we not?
We didn't talk about Myles Garrett,
yeah.
But I don't think Cleveland's trading Myles Garrett. I hate making predictions.
End of story.
And you guys, and this will be recorded and replayed for ahead of the Myles Garrett
comes down.
Introductory press conference in the indoor facility in Egan. But the Browns aren't a terrible team if they had better quarterback play. If they had something better than the worst quarterback play in the history of quarterback play.
Yeah.
Of this century.
Our listeners, I love them. Negative Nate writes, man, Gessling is killing it in studio today. And
he was in studio with a PA, I think.
Was he
today? Well, maybe I think they do it at the studio. You should come out. You should come out and do shows there. They got a whole thing set up.
I think we've done that, but why would we?
So it'd be easier for me.
Yeah, it's a lot easier for you, not so much for us.
Yeah.
For those of us who are West Side snobs, which you kind of are, but you have to be there, right? That's 5
days a week.
And then 952 guy, hey, Johnny K, I really liked your bye week article on the Vikings as well. How about this idea? Trade JJ.
Oh, no.
And restock draft choices. Darnold was the 3rd overall draft pick, has experience. Now he has weapons. He's 5-0. We have our franchise quarterback. Then you can restock. What can you get from JJ? 2 ones? Well, that might be a bit excessive, but
yeah, he's a full year older than when I declared that it would be the most ridiculous idea in history to trade him. So he's gotten a full year older, and now
you want a full draft back? You want to get some picks back? Double down on Sam Darnold.
Yeah, potentially that, or they just need to suck it up for this year and get back to doing normal drafts after that.
Yeah, well, maybe that's the case. Tom from Columbia Heights. I'm impressed Barreiro has not yet shamed Seifert about not showing up to the fair in October. That's Tom. What does he mean by that?
Meaning that the fair was a long time ago, and you're still on it. Still becoming a
We've done it without you, I think. I think Guardsy did it the last time. Hey, he cheap shotted you about it.
I get what I deserve.
Yeah, but you don't apologize for any of it. You stand tall on it.
I mean, if you're
anti-fair.
I'm committed to it.
Yeah, I still don't understand it, but apparently you are. We're favored. Is it by 2 or 3? I
think I saw that. Yeah,
for this game. So are we going hard on the nobody believes in us the bit?
Well, it was interesting. The Vikings posted a snippet of O'Connell's speech to the players when they came back yesterday from the bye, and one of the things he said is we're perfectly fine with nobody talking about the Minnesota Vikings.
I heard he didn't say that yesterday. Did he say that yesterday?
Oh, that wasn't yesterday?
No.
They posted it yesterday.
They posted it yesterday. I think when we talked about this, I mentioned you'd posted it. We both got ripped that it was actually from further back. They just happened to post it that day, but it wasn't from yesterday.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's true. You may have more information.
Still think whether he said it yesterday, I think that still applies. They're very happy to not have anybody talking about the Minnesota Vikings, and so they can play that for. I mean, they might as well play that for as long as they can. Like eventually, the record's going to be at a point where like no one can avoid it.
So you got us winning this week? You got a 6-0?
I don't have to predict games, but and I'm glad because I would be always wrong. I think this is where it if I had to guess,
reality might set in.
Where reality sets in, and I'm sure I'll get crushed for it.
Which doesn't mean you're saying they're frauds.
It doesn't mean they're going to start.
They're not going to go undefeated.
No, they're not going to go undefeated, and maybe they win at home and they lose at Detroit, but like Detroit is really good, and I know the Hutchinson thing, but this is. And I know they've already made their way through a gauntlet, but this is the best team they've played so far by a significant margin.
So, yeah, I mean they're good. There's any question now? Again, I think it may well come down to what you were talking about regarding how well the Vikings can handle their running game. Yeah. Because I do think as much as they can do both, that it is all predicated on just a great commitment to the run and great running backs and a great line and execution of the run. And if you throw them off that, then maybe you got a better chance to get a couple of takeaways from Goff. We're averaging 3 takeaways a game. I don't know if that's realistic to continue, but that's been a big part of why we're sitting there.
Absolutely, and I do think you can get Goff on some of that. I do think that. If for some reason the Lions aren't able to run, then I think, and them being a one-dimensional passing team, let's see how that works out for them.
Tell Gerby there's some false advertising on his Packer Connection site as well.
That's
an oldie. That's an oldie but a goodie.
Yeah, I actually looked at that briefly. I'm scared by what's on that site, and I will not return.
Do we know who's doing the TV call for our matchup? We got to get one of the better groups, right? Even though it's a noon game.
Hopefully, it's at least Greg Olsen and
it's Fox, right?
Yeah,
we did determine that.
Joe Davis. Yeah. I don't know who
it's Adam Amin, Greg Olsen, and Pam Oliver.
Oh, Greg Olsen.
They just sent the release out earlier today.
Okay, there you go. We'll take Greg.
That's not being disrespectful.
Olsen's better than Brady right now. Have you watched any of the Brady stuff?
Yeah. I haven't watched enough, but what I have watched, the great example for me was who's his partner?
Burkhardt.
Yeah, Burkhardt's trying to draw him out. I think he's trying to help. And you got this cataclysmic McCarthy injury.
Aiden
Hutchinson injury. And he asked the obvious, how tough is it to just, and he couldn't have given a more cliche-ridden answer. He's still in that mode. I'm not done with him. I'm not ready to give up on him at all. But I agree with you. He needs a lot of work.
I like he gets emotionally into the game, which is good.
That is
which is what you want. Just the insight that Olsen gives into what coaches are thinking, what players are thinking, what should be coming next, why something didn't come the way it was supposed to.
Yeah,
he's just above and beyond everybody right now.
Yeah, that's true. Now, did you watch much of Belichick with the Manning? Is he on Manning Cast every week?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And how are they as a threesome? Is it pretty good?
Yeah. They're none of them are like Belichick is good because he's not he's got to have the floor the entire time. He's got a lot of one-liners that he throws in and has taken advantage of all his media appearances, just crush the Jets whenever he can.
Yeah.
And that's entertaining. But he's also obvious, any guy who's had the success that he's had, what you would think knows what to say, but he's actually able to articulate in a short amount of time some really insightful things about what's happening in the game and why something went the way it did. Like he talked about for that Hail Mary last night, when Aaron Rodgers has the Hail Mary and you say and the Bills only rushed 2 guys, and so it gave Rodgers forever, and so they said you should Peyton Manning I think said you got to blitz the Hail Mary, which people talk about, but what Belichick said is that's if you blitz, then you're giving them the sidelines and they can throw a 10-yard pass and then get in position for a field goal.
Right.
And then right after that, Sean McDermott said to the sideline as he was walking off to the reporter that he didn't that's what he was most worried about is he didn't want to give up the the 10-yard pass to set up a field goal, and so he was defending the sidelines, and that's why he didn't have enough people rushing, and he didn't have enough people in the end zone to knock the pass down. So, in other words, I mean, Belichick, that was pretty good to get that from Belichick in real time and not have to spend 2 minutes saying it either. So
you will be downtown Minneapolis Sunday at noon?
Absolutely.
Not going to miss this one.
Didn't get to go to London, so
now
I can certainly make it to Minneapolis.
You're hungry and maybe even starving a little bit. You're ready.
Starving, yeah.
It's a nice little matchup, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in as always. We appreciate it. Whatever your name is, Kevin Seifert.
Yep.
And Chip Scoggins,
I'll answer
Gerby, whoever the case may be, Gessling. Yeah, there's a number of others that now it's open season on it. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Seifert joins us pretty much weekly and often in studio as well. Lou Nanny is not only back with us because hockey season has begun, he will be in studio today. In fact, he will join us during the Top 5 at 5. You have questions for him. If you're already hitting the panic button regarding your Minnesota Wild, let us know. Bradshaw and Bryant, KFAN text line 64686. What will be included in the Top 5?
Baseball update, NFL trade update, and a Julius Randle, when will he debut update.